you do speak, please press the button under the microphone so that it'll turn on and everyone can hear you. I just want to start off by going around and introducing everyone. Introduce yourselves just so that we know who is who and everyone that's here in attendance knows who's speaking. I'm Alice Darian, the town manager.
Cameron Kegel.
Mike Benson, elected official.
Tom Leonard, Alderman.
Brian Eads, attorney, town attorney, and Mr. Kegel, Mr. Benson, and Mr. Leonard are the town's representative on the Revetment Committee. Are we recording this?
Yes.
Turn your microphone on, please.
Just so the minutes will reflect that.
Jim Connor, I'm attorney representing Sid Wyford and the other homeowners on the committee.
Sid Wyford, I'm on the homeowner side of the committee.
Bill Foreman, I'm with Arundel Engineers in Morehead City.
Brian, you want to? Also in attendance?
Yeah.
Is
Mayor?
Mayor McDermott.
Okay. Okay.
And Brian will.
If you move over one, you can mute everybody as well.
Don't give me that. Don't give me that power.
Don't give it that.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'll just kind of identify where I believe we are, where we last left it. Well, I'll back up. The town selected its committee members, I believe, in December of 17. Sometime in, I believe it was early 18, I'll say the plaintiffs, in the underlying lawsuit that led to this settlement, appointed their committee members. We've had several meetings since that time. Originally, an engineer, Mr. Green, was recommended. Pursuant to the settlement agreement, the committee was to suggest a first and second choice of engineers to oversee and design this project. Mr. Green was originally selected or recommended. The town Board of Aldermen voted to approve him. There were a series of meetings with Mr. Green. I can't, and Mr. Benson, maybe you can shed some light, or Ms. Wyford, maybe you can. Ultimately, Mr. Green just stopped responding. At that point, Mr. Foreman's company, is it Arundel, am I saying it right, sir? Arundel? Yes. Was recommended to replace Mr. Green. We being the Board of Aldermen voted to accept that recommendation. We started down the path of negotiating a contract. There were a few contract terms that ultimately Mr. Foreman and I were able to work out related to prevailing party and attorney's fees, liability, things like that. Fast forward, there was a proposal made that was under a cover email that, and Mr. Foreman, and please correct me if I misstate this in any way, that there was some concern that Mr. Harper or his company might make some sort of proprietary claim regarding the design of the sandbags. And I've got all those emails if we need to get them out specifically.
Yeah, you're correct. He was claiming some copyright rights.
Can you press your microphone,
please? Harper was claiming some copyright rights to some of the drawings he provided, the information, and yeah, anyway, it's a long story, but
Well,
I think it held us up for.
yes, sir.
Of
And I'll just kind of not gloss over, but
course, he's
drill down.
subsequently assumed room temperature, so he.
Yeah, and, you know,
Hopefully beneath room temperature.
I'll just add that Mr. Foreman was forthright and notified the town as soon as he was aware of that condition. So we appreciate your forthrightness.
Right.
From the town's from my perspective as town attorney, I advised the Board of Aldermen, and I believe this is all public, so I don't think I'm waiving any attorney-client privilege, that I had significant concerns. The contract that was proposed to the town was with Arundel, not Mr. Harper. And I wanted to make sure that if we went forward with the design, the town was protected by way of either a release or an indemnification from Arundel. Pertaining to any claims Mr. Harper or his company could bring. COVID hits somewhere along in there. Mr. Harper passes away. I've not seen his estate file, but I understand his wife is now somewhat cognizant of
Right,
this situation.
yeah, I've talked to her, she's open to do whatever, she doesn't want to stand in the way.
Right.
The way it stands right now, the bag supplier, Flint Industries,
Could you give me that name again? I'm sorry. Mr.
bag supplier is called Flint Industries.
Flint, like,
It's a guy named Bill Smallwood.
and where are they out of?
I don't know, up Virginia somewhere.
I thought it was Virginia.
Maybe, no, they're from down around Hilton Head.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, Savannah, he knows Yogi's family, his wife, pretty well, and he had made, what we was gonna do was make some kind of a deal with her that she would get so much per bag or something. But that in order for us to get an indemnification from her, if we were gonna make a deal, he was gonna make a deal, we were gonna make a deal with her to get her out of the way.
Okay.
But that has not taken place.
Well, and I went through some old emails last night. Mr. Benson, I believe in October of '21, you had indicated that you had talked with Ms. Wyford and that Mr. Foreman had proposed obtaining a release from the estate. And you had asked that I be provided with her information. I cannot find where I was ever provided with that information. Not saying it wasn't sent, but if it was sent, either I lost it, or went to spam box or whatever. That's been kind of the snag. The town has earmarked its $200,000 obligation under the settlement agreement from day one. We were the first to get our and this is not a competition, this is just a historical fact. The town had their representatives appointed. The town went with the first recommendation of Mr. Green. When he went into the wind, we went with Mr. Rendell, or Mr. Foreman at Rendell. And then these other complications arose regarding, first, we had to negotiate the terms of the contract. And then secondly, the Yogi Harper specter of a claim came in, so.
Last interaction. The last interaction I had with the town manager with Alice, there were several town managers in this process, or interim town managers. As I gave her a set of contract documents, and I don't remember when that was, like October maybe of last year, and asked her if the town attorney could make some suggestions as to what kind of language he'd like to see in that indemnification document. And I've subsequently talked to the attorney that we work with, Clark Wright up in New Bern, if he would prepare that. He hasn't given me a positive answer on that, but I can't prepare it. I'm not going to practice law right in your face.
And I know
If you want to put it together.
Mr. Connor and I both know Clark, and I think I could speak for you, Jim. He's a competent lawyer, and
Yes.
I've worked with him on several occasions in the past. I'll be happy to draft a release document if she's willing to sign it. Are we concerned about the sandbag manufacturer making some sort of
No,
claim?
I'm not worried about him. He cares about selling sandbags.
Okay.
He would be one of the people we would then want to include. Him, the town, Arundel engineers, a contractor yet to be identified, all be indemnified, so there's nobody left out there in the process to,
Well, I'll let Mr. Connor speak to this, but there are two different concepts. A release means she can't bring a claim.
right,
Indemnification is more of, if she does bring a claim, someone else is going to take care of that.
I think no claim is what we're looking for.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
more in the form of release.
Release from her.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So, that's where we are. I mean, you know, not touting this, I mean, the revetment, was very expensive. Obviously, we had initially wanted to do something much larger, but those houses are still standing today, and I think in large part because of the revetment, thankfully. We have that pot of money, $650,000 less. How much have we paid? 37, you sent an email. 26,000 something to Mr.
Yeah, 26 in engineering fees were around $26,000. $26,308.81 to be exact.
And so we're, you know, from the town's perspective, we're ready, willing, and able to perform. Some of these things have been beyond our control. In particular, the whole Harper claim thing. Candidly, we weren't aware that that was even an issue until, as Mr. Benson, Mayor Pro Tem Benson pointed out, Mr. Foreman put that out front and said, hey, Yogi may make Mr. Harper may make a claim related to the design aspect of what you had originally proposed. So there's been a lot of, and I'm just going to put this out there to clear the air, there's been a lot of finger pointing. Some of that's been towards me, which I feel comfortable I can show the correspondence back and forth, but hey, I'll park my ego and pride to the side if we can advance this ball and move forward. Everyone in this room wants the most protection we can get for the amount of money that we've allocated for this project. We have that in common, and I think if we start with that, we can have a productive, hopefully a productive meeting. And Alice, unless you want me to add anything to that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Connor and he can add.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, sir.
In talking to the contractors that I gave you a list of 4 that we had talked to and who were interested in, and that was a while back, but it was this year, I think. They all seem to think they could do more, because we don't know, but what we think we'd like to do is structure the contract to get as much out of the money as we can, and make that a condition of the award of the contract, how much you can do and what it's going to cost.
Jim?
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian, for that summary. And as I suppose y'all all know, I've been out of the loop for the last 5 years. Was horrified to get a call from Sid Wyford saying not a single sandbag's been laid since we settled this case 5 years ago and put the money in the bank. But I'm not here to point fingers. I don't know who to point fingers at. I wasn't involved in it. I don't know the blow-by-blow on it. But I certainly am gratified to hear that we're all ready to move forward now. I wish this had been 4 years ago, but it wasn't. And it's water under the bridge, and let's get it done now. You know, it sounds like the Yogi Harper issue is about worked out, that his wife's ready to sign a release, it sounds like, but
She has indicated she was not going to be standing in the way.
not going to stand in the way. I have to say, I mean, I knew Yogi, and he was a character, we all know that. And
That's an understatement.
he was wildly proud of his sandbag techniques, and he probably did have some better techniques than most of the guys did, I think. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
But
I would agree. From a technical standpoint, I don't think you'd find anyone more competent. Now,
but a copyright claim, I don't know, that seems laughable to me. I mean, does he have a registered, is he registered a copyright? Has he got a patent?
I
mean,
don't know.
think
That's what I was
so.
thinking about that coming up here, thinking, if you had a copyright, it's got to be registered somewhere, it's got to be identified,
Yeah, I think that,
He just kind of claimed it, and
which is real Yogi of him. That's the kind of shit Yogi did all the time. Excuse my language, but he's passed on, and I think Yogi's a great guy in a lot of ways, but he was also a character with a big ego, who was very proud of his work, and took me out and spent hours showing me how great his sandbags were compared to somebody else's sandbags, and that's great, you know. But people who are good at their work, that's fine, but that doesn't automatically give you a copyright or a patent or any kind of other thing you can sue somebody over if they build something that looks like what you built. People do that all the time. You copy what the best guy in town does because it works, unless he goes out and gets a patent or gets a copyright, and I don't think Yogi's done either one of those things. So I think we don't need to worry about that. If we can get a release from the wife, super, then that resolves any minor worries we might have about a nuisance lawsuit or something, but I just can't imagine that being a claim that any court would uphold.
To that point, and I agree with everything you said, especially the part about Yogi being a character. How difficult would it be to search out and make a determination, yay or nay, that he really did or really did not have a copyright? Because I think that's key here. If he didn't, then we just move forward and deal with his estate as you see fit. If he does have a copyright, it may be a different story, but I agree with you. I have a hard time thinking that he did.
Yeah, and I've got.
I'm like that, but fear. I agree with you. I think he used the fear of legal action as a weapon.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a lot of bluster and bluff in that, which was not unusual for Yogi. And so, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Push the button. Hit the button. Press the button. Release to listen.
Yeah, let me.
I'm sure we can hear you.
All right, well, has he tried this on any
Okay,
current
it's on.
projects? Has his widow come on any other jobs and has tried this to your knowledge?
I haven't been involved in any others.
Right, so I mean, if she's the only one if our project here is the only one she's trying this with, it seems a little.
Well, I think Bill Smallwood is a little bit, of Flint Industries is a little bit wary of her also.
Did I hear you correctly earlier when you said that she was trying to take a cut on every bag?
Well, that was what Bill had Smallwood had, and I kind of hammered out as a way to, I mean, what might be $2 or something per bag, or, you know, it's not going to be anything significant, but it's you know, just something to. Yeah.
I understand that, it's just,
And I don't
I like
know-
the approach we've just.
I don't know what kind of
Come up with-
condition Yogi left her in, so that may be playing into this.
Fair enough.
This thing ain't working.
Maybe only a certain number can be on at a
Okay.
time or something.
Turn yours
I don't
off and
know
see
back
if mine
either.
turns on. Here we go. Not to bash Mr. Harper, but some back history. I was on the board when the original construction took place. Mr. Harper was very upset that Mr. Harper did not get the contract for the original design and the original work. He and Mr. Burns were both very upset. And he went to they went to a sitting board member at the time, not me, to make that displeasure known, who then brought it to the remainder of the board. So there's a whole lot of, back to your point, bluster, litigious society, I'm gonna sue you, and that's kind of where everything was when Mr. Harper passed away.
Well, he
So I'm
took
not even sure it's Mrs. Harper. Yeah, I think it's Yogi.
he took that animosity towards North Topsail Beach to his grave.
Yeah. So
May have been some of his
we may
last.
not have an issue at all, but we need to find out the copyright aspect of this,
Right.
because that would put it to bed once and for all, I think.
I've got a couple of intellectual property is what lawyers call that, copyrights, patents, all that stuff, trademarks. I've got a couple of intellectual property lawyers in my firm. I could make a call when we get done, or even we could take a break and I could make a call and say, how do we figure this out? I don't know. That's not my field of work, but these guys are top of the field in New York City and the whole deal, so we could find out. how you establish the presence or absence of a copyright. But it certainly there has to be some paperwork on that. Just him saying, hey, I've got a great design and I'll see if you use it. Well, so what? You know, you gotta actually have it registered somewhere.
He had an attorney up in, I don't know where, somewhere that, did you know who he was?
Yeah, I know who he was.
I could find out, but
That'd be
when
good.
everything he did went through that guy.
Oh.
And,
Clark Wright.
no, it wasn't Clark,
But he
but
may
Clark would
also
know,
know.
he would know.
It was, Bob Hornick was one of his lawyers.
That may be him.
Oh, really? I know
Yeah.
Bob. I'm working with Bob on a different case right now.
Well, let me ask this question, because we've been delaying and delaying because talking about the waiver and so forth and so on. If we were to go ahead and have a waiver signed, would that be the town and the plaintiff submitting that there was indeed a design or a copyright in existence? Would it be simplest just to go ahead and have the waiver signed and move on?
It would be essentially a release, and it would be to the extent she, as an heir to his estate, has any claims, she releases the town, and I'm assuming you won't want to.
Yeah, all involved. Yeah.
From any claims.
And there'd be language in there that we don't think she has any claims, but she, you know, if she thinks she does, she releases them.
Does she have a lawyer? Don't know.
Not that
I would assume that it's the guy we just spoke of. I think Yogi probably left her affairs in the hands of Horning, or what was his name, Horning?
Bob Hornick, is it the,
Is he in Chesapeake up there?
Bro
He was in
Firm
Chapel
and
Hill.
Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and I've recently worked with Bob on numerous things for Rifle Beach. He's readily available. And then we can call a cell phone today if we need to. Not trying to pick a scab here, but not trying to pick a scab here, and just so Jim knows if he hadn't seen this, the catalyst for this concern came from a memorandum authored by Mr. Foreman dated October 20th, 2020. This memorandum provides an update of the status. As you know, Arundel Engineers has had a partnership of sorts with Erosion Control Specialists of North Carolina, Inc., Mr. Yogi Harper, President. We have worked on several projects with ECPNC, including the Reefs Condominium in Tubbs Inlet. Mr. Harper has assisted us in putting together the design of the revetment sections for the town of North Topsail Beach. The hope was that the TNTB could sole source the project and Yogi's company would do the installation. So that was the catalyst of the concern. Again, this is not casting aspersions. This is more for Mr. O'Connor's edification if you hadn't seen this. At that point, I don't think anyone, and Mr. Leonard, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you were on the board, we weren't aware that there was any nexus with Yogi with respect to the revetment project. So that's what set the cascaded all of the stuff. This memo set everything in motion. Now that's, I don't want to, we can talk about it if you want, but I think the short, most efficient solution would be to get a release from Ms. Harper, and then we can put that whole concern to bed.
Is that something you could draft up?
Yeah, sure. I just need
Give
her
the bill
information. I don't know her full name and all
I'll
of
get that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll
If we can, if we can get that, I agree completely. That settles it, and let's move on. If, in the meantime, while we're sitting here, I'm drafting an email to my intellectual property guys to see what they have to say about how we verify the absence of a copyright, and we'll see what they have to say. But yeah, let's get that issue behind us and get this thing built.
And understand, Jim, just so you'll know from the towns, we were kind of in the blind on this. We didn't know what contractual relationship, if any, Arundel had with Yogi. This was our first notice of it, so that's what started this whole concern.
Gotcha.
And to Mr. Benson's point earlier, we appreciate Mr. Foreman bringing that to our attention on the front end, so we didn't run into an issue on the back end. All right, so task-wise, Mr. Foreman, you're going to provide me with Ms. Harper's identification information, full name,
Right.
I'll draft a release, circulate that to Mr. Connor for his review and approval. Once we agree to the contents of the release, we'll forward that to Ms. Harper for execution. Okay.
What's the network key here? Pardon?
It's listed on the paper.
It's right.
Can't send an email without internet.
It's right. It's right there, Jim.
You might communicate with Bill Smallwood with Flint Industries, and I'll send you that information. Because he's had more extensive conversations with Yogi's widow than I have. I had one conversation with her, and that,
All right, and I'm assuming he's gonna wanna be one of the parties being released.
I would
or
think so.
his company, okay. So you're gonna provide the information, I'll take the first stab at the draft, forward it to Mr. Connor, and then once we have a document, a release we agree on, we'll forward that to Ms. Harper. Are we in agreement on that? Okay.
Yeah, fine. Let's get it moving.
All right, so, I guess the next item would be, the Arundel contract. Unless you change the body, I'm not talking about the design component, Mr. Foreman, but you and I had already negotiated the contract itself a while back.
right, and I sent Alice an amendment, which I just basically rearranged the scope, but I didn't change the fee.
Are you talking about the bid contract, or
Yeah, the contract with the rental engineers.
I don't have the contract for Arundel?
See, we signed a contract with the town before you came. Who was, Mike, you remember who the town manager was?
David Gilbride.
Yeah,
Gilbride was there when we negotiated the final terms of the
yeah,
contract.
I just figured if we just go ahead and prevent any controversy, we just go ahead and continue that contract, but I rearranged the scope of the work in that amendment. I can send it to you, and kept the fee the same. I'm getting pushback from my office on that, but that's my problem.
Now, I'm looking at a project manual dated October 30th, 2020, that you did send to Ms. Darian, because she forwarded it to me.
Yes,
Okay.
and
But
I need you to review that. And I have some ongoing discussions with the Division of Coastal Management. They have a new person working this territory. Her name is Tina Martin. And we're talking back and forth about where the sand is, where we can get the sand. Can we take it off the beach, or is there some options for taking it off the beach, which basically doubles the amount of beach we can protect, and or do we have to haul it in from a quarry or a sand mine down in Pender County? So we're working on that.
There's somebody, thank you. Bill, does taking it off the beach have any negative implications for the homeowners? In other words, is that the town spent a bunch of money bringing sand in to make the beach bigger and stronger. Is taking sand off the beach gonna hurt us?
Well, I don't know, one of the questions I had for today was, I know the Corps of Engineers was putting sand out on the beach. I saw it after the first nourishment they did. I guess it's sand from a channel up the river. That's seemed to be pretty fine sand, but it's perfect for bags. So,
That's this morning at high tide.
oh, that's the
There is no
Corps of
sand.
Engineers is, yeah. Are they up to put another dose of sand out there, or?
Yeah, what Sid just showed Bill was a picture that she showed me earlier of just high tide this morning, no storm, and there's water up under her house. So I don't think there's much of a beach to take sand from,
Yeah.
really.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was one of the allegations in the underlying lawsuit, that we called it the spit back then, that had been mined to create the revetment. And if we're gonna mine any sand from the beach, I wanna make sure we're not inviting lawsuit for over mining the beach sand, so.
There'd have to be a lot of beach out there for us to do that.
Yeah,
A lot of beach.
that's not an option.
How about, as an option, Spoil Island behind North Topsail Beach? How about that as a potential option, Bill?
I would definitely look at that.
And I'll tell you why. Been here 20 years. Watched the guy we talked about earlier when he did the project at Topsail Reef. You've got a longtime resident sitting in the audience, and he pumped sand directly out of in front of where he put the bags. And to say it was a disaster in the long run, probably what it did to the beach slope there, it didn't work well. And we go back to the issue already raised by the attorneys about the spit. And I think someone who lives up near there, that we need to do everything we can to preserve what beach we have there in that area and not rob Peter to pay Paul. I'm not an engineer,
Well,
and
I'm
I
not,
didn't stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I just
I
think
hear-
there's a
I
better
hear
way
you,
to
and
do this.
I agree with you. There's-
Okay.
yeah.
And
But
maybe
you
the
are,
Spoil
you are,
Island-
the other
I like
thing,
the
the
Spoil-
other
I like the Spoil
downside
Island
of
idea.
about using beach sand is it's got a lot of shell material in it. And
Mhm.
that's really not the kind of material we want to put in those bags.
I understand the cost of trucking sand and all the filtration that the sand, before it can be loaded on the trucks, has to go through, and all of that costs money, and transportation costs money. And
Right.
we can find a readily available local source of sand, we're money ahead in terms of how many bags we can fill.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, there's got to be a balance here.
Yeah. Could I jump in, and this is, sorry for taking us back a step, but I think this is really helpful. My intellectual property guy, Todd Nosher up in New York City, my partner, has graciously responded very quickly. He says, "Hi, Jim. One cannot copyright a method." So, bam. Copyrights are to cover works of expression, art, writings, design, etc. You can patent a method. I would ask them to cite the purported U.S. patent number or any of the registered IP, which is intellectual property they are claiming, and that should put it to rest, as I imagine there is none. So,
What's
Let
his
me,
name,
let
Jim?
me add something to that.
if Yogi had a patent, he'd have it tattooed on his forehead. I mean, he wouldn't be shy about telling us. Yeah.
What's your partner's name?
Todd Nosher. Two
That's
Ds
why
in
you need
Todd.
to talk to Bill Small, because the configuration that they used to manufacture the bags so they could inject sand into them without it coming out the hole where the pipe goes in, that's also something Yogi laid claim to.
That's right.
And that probably more so than the bag design. So that,
You got a card.
but Bill Small, he's the guy that manufactures the bags, and he can address that.
Could you write your
Is
email
Bill
address?
Small the guy at Flint?
He's with Flint Industries.
I'm gonna send you what stuff I
You know-
Also, he claimed the type of weave and material was
Yeah,
all covered by that patent.
Yeah, I don't know if he actually
Oh,
patented
yeah.
that bag or if,
Well, I can't read
he
it.
couldn't have done it without Bill's participation.
Probably BobSusanAttorneys.com.
We go,
He would have had the copyright numbers on his company letterhead. I'm not saying that to be smart.
There's truck, everything.
Well,
so I would like to backtrack just a second. I believe that the preferred sand source is the 421 sand mine, having it trucked in. I think that you're gonna find that it will be a nightmare to try to permit DA 143 at Spoil Island as a sand source. And the mobilization of cost to get a dredge in there to do the work and lay a pipeline is gonna be astronomical compared to the volume of sand that you actually need. And we would actually like to save that disposal site for future beach nourishment in some of the other phases of town. So we got our eye on that, because there's over, I think, 2 million cubic yards of sand in that disposal area. But trying to mine just a little bit of sand out of it will be a permitting nightmare and a heck of a mobilization cost to get a dredge in there.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. If it's offshore somewhere, there's water, open water between there and North Topsail Beach where those bags are gonna go, you're probably right.
I've got some notes here from one of our earlier meetings about DA 143. And DA 143 versus ocean dredging, the ocean dredging seemed cheaper. But we have talked about DA 143, which is the spoil island, right? On the backside. Thanks.
Does that make sense to you, Bill, that if you gotta cross water and use a dredge and so forth, that probably is not practical for the amount of sand you need? Does that sound right to you or wrong?
Well, 2 million yards, you're right, we'll make it, only make a dent in that, but, like I said, if it's offshore someplace, it has to be get it across the water, then that's gonna be costly.
What water would we need to cross to get to that? Just so we can sort of lay this to rest.
Are you talking about still
The
DA
spoil- the spoil
143?
area.
The pipeline would come down to New River Inlet, be submerged in New River Inlet. So I don't know that you wouldn't have to have an ocean certified dredge, but you'd have to have a company that can lay a pipeline, well, like Cottrell, that's gonna do the core dredging to channel to Jacksonville this winter.
So, Mr. Benson, the spoil island itself is somewhere up in the New River, is that,
It's on the ICW.
okay.
Yeah, they're ICW in the channel to Jacksonville. This is what's gonna be dredged, 100 and,
The dredge works right there. They used to put the sand there before they bought
That.
it works right there, so the pipe should be right there.
Okay.
Can you describe for everyone exactly where, from the inlet, the VA is that you're talking about?
all right, so when you come in the New River Inlet and you arrive at the ICW, Intercoastal Waterway Crossing, you're coming out of Cedar Bush Cut, heading towards Jacksonville, the mound of trees on your left is the spoil island we're talking about. It's about a half a mile long, and it's forested now.
So it's at the crossroads.
It's at the crossroads of the ICW and the channel of Jacksonville.
Thank you. Well, so,
Well, everyone knows the funds that we have. I guess the question is, knowing the funds that we have, what is the most advantageous route that we can do at this point?
I think we gotta structure the bid documents to find that out. Let these guys who are resourceful and give them some options. And my experience is the contractors are the guys who are the most resourceful. And if you give them some flexibility, they can.
So are you proposing that the contract documents be amended?
Yeah, I'll
Again.
change the bid, the structure of the bid for sure. What I was looking for the town attorney to look at was basically the general conditions and supplementary conditions that talk about insurance and liability and all those kind of things.
And theirs won't change regardless of the,
No, those things won't change.
that makes sense to me to let the guys who do it all the time figure out the best place to get the sand and structure it. I assume you're saying you'd structure it so that they would have an incentive to get it at the most reasonable price so they could do the most bags, is that right? Yeah.
Can somebody, okay. Here's my concern, and I'm gonna voice it again. What may give us the most amount of bags may be overall to the detriment of that end of the island.
Of what?
To the overall detriment of that end of the island. Filling the most bags is only one piece of this puzzle. I know it's a very important piece, but I'm concerned that your contractors or the bids may come in with contractors either wanting to re-excavate the sand spit, which is a no-go,
No.
or re-excavate out in front of those houses up there, which again is a no-go. And if they're only looking at it from a perspective of what fills the most bags cheapest, those are probably going to be some obvious conclusions, and they don't work.
Well, we'll rule those out in
Okay.
hand
Okay.
before we Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with
Yeah, I just want to make sure, Bill, that we're all on the same page on this,
We are,
because we're only going to rob Peter to pay Paul in the end if we're not.
right. I understand that.
And part of the reason we're here, you know, is because of some of that.
So, Bill, you sent us a design back last fall for the town to look at. I don't know if the plaintiffs looked at it, but before we can go to a contract, this group has to agree on the kind of design that we're going to use. I know we've been not arguing, we've been discussing the Harper liability issue, but I'm very unsettled in my mind as to how the new bags are going to be laid. And so, I don't know, maybe I could insert myself now with the slide set I've prepared for the group to bring everybody up to speed on the current conditions. And at a certain point, maybe you can explain how your design is going to fit in with what's there, and we can talk about some of the specifics about the foundation that's still there, the layers of bags that are still there, the geotube. There's a whole lot of technical aspects to this that we really need to get sorted out before we start thinking about doing the contract, when we're not sure about what we want the contractors to do yet, in my opinion.
And just to point out too, in our initial meeting, the first meeting that I had a while back, there was discussion on, which was another main concern, was digging down into the sandbags instead of laying on and building on top. Is
Okay.
that still your proposed?
I think our
method
design,
forward?
it can be in the notes, I have to look at it and see, but I think, we're not allowing putting bags on top of bags that are not in good condition. We would take those bags off and go down to a level of sand that is intact. And when we build the new revetment on top of either sand, of course, there's a layer of geotextile that goes in there.
Have you recently looked at the bags?
I haven't
And their
seen them. I
condition.
started to drive up there this morning and I ran out of time. But I got a feeling, I know what they look like. I've seen them a while.
Are you going to cannibalize the bags you feel aren't in good condition? I mean, like,
They
what are you
would
going to,
take out the bags that are not in good
are
condition.
you just going to cut them and let the sand stay
Cut it,
there?
we might cut them, let the sand go, or use it, maybe figure out if there's some way to use the sand, I don't know. Yeah, it's not good.
No, it's not good.
Are we trying to get out there and see it?
Well, yeah, high tide was at 7:47, low tide was at 2:18. So we're 2 hours past high tide, and we're 4 hours and change away from.
Or does it make sense to take a little recess, go out there and look?
I think we
Or
ought to do it at the end of the meeting, because the longer we wait, the further to low tide we're gonna get.
I think the slide set will help you understand.
Okay.
Dynamics of how things change. Exactly best for it.
I don't think you'll have to get on the car.
I got some boots in my car.
I used to carry a pair of
I don't think you'll wanna get out of the car, quite frankly. I was there this morning. I stayed all night and you'd be lucky if you'd be able to get, you're certainly welcome to go park in what's left of my driveway and walk down from there, but you won't be able to even get on the beach in 2 hours because of the water, probably. Yeah.
You can tell by this picture you might put up, there's moss growing, or there's algae growing on those bags, there's a little water most of the time. Go ahead, Mike.
What are we doing? We're going to look at the slide set?
Yeah, we're
Let me see it. All right. We're just gonna say, okay. So this is historic view, back and forth.
You can stand over, you can stand over. It'll pick you up.
Okay. I don't put my back to anybody. All right, so right here's what we're talking about. Look at all that beach that was in front of the reef. Next. Okay, so this is prior to construction of the bags. Next. this is the beginning of the construction. What I want you to notice here is two things. You can see this, a geotube, this long tube structure, had to be placed down to keep the water from coming into the construction area where the bags were laid, okay? That geotube is still there. It's buried in sand. Notice that the foundation is 2 bags wide. This is the foundation layer. Next. All right, so you can see that foundation layer in this slide. And you can see what they did was they built up 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of bags from that foundation layer. Okay, next. All right, this is down towards Oyster Lane crossover. Here's the Topsail Reef condo bags that were already in place, and they're constructing the bags along the North Revetment here. Next. And again, you get a good aerial of the foundation here. They put a mat down under that foundation. You can see the mat right here. 2 bags, and then the layers up. And that's how it went all the way. Also see that that geotube ends right here. This is the Oyster Lane crossover. The geotube ends right there. Because it was dry enough here, they didn't need the geotube to protect the construction site. Next. Okay, and then behind the bags, they backfilled it to keep the bags from going back that way when the water came in. So this is the backfill. So those asking about what to do with the bags that are torn, we have to empty out. Well, probably put that sand behind where the new bags are going to go. Next. You get a good idea of this layer effect. There were like, I think we counted 4 or 5 layers above the foundation layer. Okay, next. All right, this was 218. The bag line was in pretty good shape in 218. Here, down by Oyster Lane. Next. All right, and you can see the jumbled bags here along this stretch. Next. And more jumbled bags, 218, more jumbled bags. Next. And then you see that these bags have been exposed for a while because the camera said they got algae on them. Okay, and they're disarrayed here. But you still got this layer, and this is what I'm asking about, Mr. Foreman. You still got this layer here to build up from in certain places. Okay, next. And again, the jumble, 219. It gets worse. Next. What are we going to do here in an area where the bag line is covered with sand? You can't lay bags on that. You got to lay bags on your foundation layers.
It's not covered anymore.
Next.
It's not covered now. You're right.
Yeah. All right, so here's 220. The surf's coming up to the bag line, and then it's not. But again, in this section, it's in pretty good shape. Next.
Is that the southernmost end?
That was by Oyster Lane, yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is a bit further down towards the inlet, just showing the kind of the jumble of bags. It's a jumble now. Next. And again, how jumbled it has become with the bags being knocked over. But here's the foundation right here. It's still there in places. Just have to get to it. Okay, next. And again, it's really pretty bad. This is down towards this little Whiteford's place. Next. It's gonna be tough in that area. Okay? So I showed this slide because this is down again by Oyster Lane. Difference between March and September. Next. And this is that same area last week. And that's my question. This whole bag line is covered with sand through here. Okay, so somehow I think we have to do this in a triage fashion. We've got to work the areas, particularly where we're getting ocean overwash down towards this Whiteford's house. But here, I mean, yeah, the water comes up under these houses at high tides when we have storms, it's not doing any real damage other than coming into the houses. So until this area recedes, remember, there's at least 2 layers of sand bags here, plus that geotube. The geotube and the sandbags, what's left of them, has acted like a lateral terminal groin. And it's helping trap the sand and keeping it on the beach. Okay? So if we were to dig down here, we're gonna cause erosion problems, in my mind. We've gotta wait till Mother Nature exposes those bags before we can go in and put new bags on top of them.
Well, to say that the geotube is out there is a bit of a stretch. The geotube has collapsed in front of my house and in front of Steve's house. It has not been there for probably well over 18 months, maybe 2 years. I mean, if you take a look, today is a good time to take a look at the damage a storm does to those bags at low tide, because you'll see the result. And in many of those areas, especially around the curve, where the structure ends, there isn't even a base layer. There's no bags there. There are holes so you can walk over the base layer. So you're right, it is not a consistent.
I'm not trying to interrupt you, just so I understand you. So you're saying the bags aren't there at all, not just that they're covered?
Correct. The bags have been damaged, they're leaking sand. There are some places where you can step over the bag, you'll see it laying there. In fact, I've been concerned because I've got bags that are now wrapped around my pilings. That there's so much movement down there, and I'm sure there are other houses in our stretch where that's the case. And so, yeah, I mean,
When you say it's deflate, the collapse, I think I know what you're talking about, where the geotube is kind of visible, but there's no sand in it. It gets water in it, it kind of moves around. Is that what you're seeing?
the material is floating in the ocean.
Well, I know that the bags are tore up, and they're half
No,
a mile up the inlet,
the
some of
the
them.
geotube material is floating in the ocean.
So you're saying the geotube itself is not intact anymore?
No,
Okay.
in spots, the geotube has been damaged, there's holes in it.
You
It's-
visually see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my understanding is the geotube was supposed to be taken out when the project was over. It was used to be used as tow protection, which is
That's right.
what it's good, that's what
And I think that
Can I just, Mr. Benson, we obtained several variances to keep that in there, and ultimately, the last variance was more of a compromise with DCM staff, that it could remain there until it was breached, and then we would have to cut it out as that occurred.
cut the fabric as it was exposed.
Right. But
We
I wasn't.
did do that in certain sections.
We went to the CRC, of course, originally to get the variance, but at least 3 more times that I'm aware of for extensions and to keep the geotube there.
Is it, so I think what's, got too many, Brian, do you mind?
Oh.
Thank you. So would it be fair to say, and again, I've been out of the loop for 4 years, but last time I saw it, and I think we're seeing in these pictures too, there's a pretty high variation between one end of the project and the other in terms of what you got left, how much protection the houses still have, the condition the sandbags are in. Yeah, I see nods there. So in the settlement agreement says, and I won't try to read it, but it basically says that what's going to happen is we're going to have an equally high, equally protective revetment the entire length. So it seems to me, and I'm not the engineer, and I've deferred to Bill on this, but it seems to me that, you know, at the end where we've already got something pretty good, you probably may not be doing very much, but down at the end where you got nothing left, you're going to be building several sandbags high. That's what I would just envision as a layperson. Does
That's
that
what
make
I'm
sense?
suggesting by triage, because there's some sections that are severely damaged, exactly. We need to address those areas first. Ricky, next slide. So here's some of the work that was done at Topsail Reef condominiums, the sandbag revetment to the south of our revetment. And here's their old dark colored bags. And what they did was they laid a whole layer of new bags up, and you can see them down here. They laid bags on top of the old bags. So I think we're looking, in my mind, for something like this. And that's why I'm asking about the design, because I just don't know that we can go down and take the foundation bags out, because they're still there, and come up with a new design and get very far down the revetment in terms of restoration.
Can we ask how those bags look today with all the damage? Did it look the same today?
There were like five bags after Ian that came out of that whole bag line along 8 buildings of the reef, which is almost a quarter of a mile long. 5 bags I counted that came off of the, even though they look kind of haphazard there, they're holding together.
Mike, they did cut open quite a few bags before they placed the new bags on there. There were quite a few that were, I mean, I know 4 or 5 right in front of mine.
But they got down to where they had a solid bag so they could fill up from. That's why I'm suggesting we should be building up somewhere there's a solid foundation to work up from.
Just a point of clarification. You're saying they only cut open 5 bags, and you were saying,
No.
okay, that's what I'm trying to
They
clear it
Quite
up.
a few. They cut off quite a few damaged bags before they
Right.
started the restoration.
Were you talking about bags that were not loose
I'm
because of iron?
Yeah. From Ian, after the project was finished, only 5 of the bags, of the new bags they placed, and there were hundreds, were actually dislodged from the revetment.
So it sounds like that what we need to do, just in general terms, again, I'm not trying to be the engineer, but it sounds like from Mr. Benson's saying and other folks are saying is there's areas where we've got a pretty good base, and maybe just who knows, we're putting 1 layer of bags to supplement that, or whatever it may be. But maybe down at Ms. Wyford's end of things, we're starting from scratch almost, because the bags are mostly gone. And so it's just going to be a variable project as you go up and down the line, so that you end up with something that's uniformly protecting everything. Does that seem like a doable engineering project, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I can't imagine how else we could do it.
Okay, good.
But again, it's all gonna come back to the funds and what we have in this fund to do this, and what, it sounds like what everyone is explaining is going to vastly exceed those funds. You may know more than I do, because you're probably seeing what bids are coming in on different projects for sandbags. I mean, what, in your professional opinion, does it look like we would be able to accomplish with the money that we have?
I can't render, I have no idea right now. I can, in a week, I can form an opinion in a week or so after I talk to some people who are a lot more expert at this than I am. And,
Didn't we have some design come in previously that gave us an idea of how far we would get from that 650? Now, no, that was a long time ago, and things are different on a daily basis there. But from the previous opinions that came in, how far was our current budget going to get?
about 500 feet,
That's really, I believe, about the size of the beach club,
right.
right?
So it extended from the end of the intact bags that are connected to the reefs, condos, some 500 feet north of that. Not much.
What year was that?
Oh, gosh, 2020 maybe?
Before COVID.
And nobody's questioned this, but just in case anyone has a question in their mind, the $450,000 that the homeowners are committed to is sitting in a bank account, hasn't been touched, so it's there, ready to go.
Is there
And
any,
that's not my concern.
is there any interest?
It's not allowed to under the contract. That's not how it's set up. But, you know, and the money thing is real. I mean, it's, 650 is what we've got. The settlement agreement says the town can elect to put more money into it than that if the town chooses, but it doesn't require the town to put more into it than that. So we just, yeah, we gotta see what that money will pay for. And again, the goal isn't to, you know, do a line of 2 sandbags deep the whole length of the thing, and so people down at one end have got 8 sandbags high, and people at the other end only have the 2. The goal is to make the whole thing approximately as protective in one point as it is in another point. So it may mean that one end gets most of the sandbags because the other end's already got a lot. That may be what it means.
Another question that I have is, let's say we've gone through all this work and we put out $650,000 worth of sandbags. From the lawyer's point of view, when has the plaintiff's case been, in the settlement agreement, been satisfied and all parties are released from the settlement agreement?
It's in the settlement agreement, Mike.
So the settlement agreement says, the town agrees to spend collectively this is paragraph 1, $650,000 to repair, rebuild, and reinforce the revetment. This work shall make the revetment as strong, high, and impervious to the ocean as is possible for $650,000, and the work shall be designed to make the revetment equally strong, high, and impervious to the ocean from one end to the other.
That's the problem.
So hold on, keep going.
I'm not sure that's possible.
Well, but that language is qualified, if I may.
Keep
The next-
going, yeah.
The next sentence.
No portion of the revetment shall be excluded from the work. None of the foregoing obligates any party to spend more than otherwise agreed upon in this agreement. This work shall be done by an engineer and contractor selected as follows, and it goes on into that portion of it. So, yeah, I mean, it just seems to me, I think we've said it 2 or 3 times and everybody's nodded their head and agreed, but so, you know, parts of it are gonna get more work and parts of it are gonna get less work depending on what's still there from the previous work. The goal is to get it as close as you can to being as protective the full length. Now, as somebody said, it's not possible, and I don't know what you meant, but maybe what you meant is if they've got 8, if there's 8 thick at one end, you're never going to get the other end to 8 thick because we don't have enough money for that.
What I'm saying is if the previous estimate came in and it really only got us protected in the beach club, there's still a long stretch of owners from the beach club all the way down to Topsail Reef that those funds have been exhausted for. So what I'm hearing you say is that's not what the settlement agreement says, and I'm trying to make sure everybody's on the same page, and we've got to try and stretch these bags as far as possible for everybody that's involved. Because if it just ends at the beach club, we've got a whole bunch of owners that have received nothing out of this settlement agreement, and a lot of them are listed in the settlement agreement.
Yeah, so,
We were no longer owners anymore, too, in a lot of cases, those ends have
yeah,
come and gone.
yeah, that's right. Things have changed hands. Ms. Mayor, so I would agree with you that, yeah, I don't think what we can do is, under the terms of this, is select one area and spend all the money in that one area. But at the same time, we almost certainly will be spending more money in some areas than in others because some, according to this slideshow and what everybody's told me, some are already pretty well protected, so they don't need much. And some have no protection and they need a lot. So it's going to be, the engineering job is to spread that $650,000 in the best way possible to get as much protection so that people are as equally protected as possible. And I don't know what else to say about
So
that.
my next question, and I know I was doing it quiet, but that you all know me and that's kind of hard. So, is the settlement agreement does not speak about communication to all of the owners who currently are along the Revetment Committee line. So, whose responsibility is that to communicate to them, say, the outcome of this meeting where, as we spoke about, these are the funds, we're gonna do absolutely best we can, we're gonna go out to bid, we're gonna see what we can do for everybody. But I have a feeling that a lot of those owners, they're not all primary residents here. We have a few that are here today, but for the most part, they're not. So they have no idea what is going on down there or what they can expect or anything. So whose responsibility is that? Because I settlement agreement.
And many of those are not the owners who were the owners when this was executed,
Exactly.
you know.
Well, but this is binding on the successors, so
Yeah.
if I can just jump in here.
Please.
The whole concept of setting up the revetment committee was to address the logistics of having to talk to however many plaintiffs there were, 20-something, whatever.
46.
46.
46, okay.
26, sorry.
So, I can't speak for the plaintiff's side of the revetment committee, but my position would be the committee's charged with making the recommendation as to the engineer. The engineer is charged with coming up with the best design he or she can under these parameters. As long as we follow the protocol set out in the revetment committee as dictated by the settlement agreement, implicitly at least, the plaintiffs and their successors have agreed to it because the original plaintiffs agreed to this protocol. Would
I
you
don't
agree with that?
disagree with that. I'm
That's
just
right.
saying I think that there's a lack of communication to the owners that are outside of this committee.
So I would say on
Because
that,
we don't even, you probably don't even know who they all are,
Yeah.
because they've changed names.
and Ms. Mayor, I would say on the communication end, I mean, first, second what Brian said, this is a contract, this is a settlement agreement, it says what it says, and everybody's bound by it. It doesn't matter if Charlie Smith has bought a house since then.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing.
Good. So, but on the communication issue, I don't know that we have a strong position on that. I think I would sort of look to the town probably because the town, see, the plaintiffs committee didn't include never included all the homeowners. Some folks said, I don't want to get involved in litigation or whatever. They didn't want to pay any money to it. Whatever the case may have been, it never involved everybody. So I would say the town is the
I don't agree with that.
is the entity that represents everybody. They all live here, and that's who would be communicating. I have no authority to communicate with people who aren't my clients, for example.
But a lot of those
Yeah.
folks are your clients and their successors are your clients. So are you all communicating with them at least that are listed in the lawsuit about what the current status is and what the plans are and where we go from here? And I know there wasn't a lot to communicate prior to now, but if there is a plan moving forward, are you communicating with the litigants and their successors?
We certainly can. When we have a plan to communicate, we would certainly be glad to send it out to everybody the folks that I represented,
Right.
4 years ago, and their successors to the extent we know who they are. I just want to be clear that the town knows that that's not everybody.
The
Yeah.
town does know that that is not everybody,
Okay.
not everybody was a litigant in the
That's right.
lawsuit, I understand that,
Right.
but I think it would, I personally, and you all may disagree because I'm not even on the committee, but I personally would like you all to communicate with your participants on your side and the town
Sure.
in general policy statements.
Yeah, we'd be glad to do
But it
that.
would be in our best interest if everybody that's in there agrees with what you are all agreeing to and we're moving forward in a cohesive manner.
Sure.
You know, just as a point of clarification from a historical perspective here, it was almost every homeowner.
It's just a couple that were.
There were one or two out of that row of houses that started immediately north of Topsail Reef and ended in the beach club. I think there were 2 homeowners who did not join the lawsuit. So it is nearly everyone.
Can I throw a couple things out that might help and might make things worse, but,
Please don't.
number one, as far as I think we're gonna have to, this group, this committee, town and the homeowners, we're gonna have to agree upon a minimum section. And that would be, right now, I don't know what that is. That means, and then agree upon what section of the beach we're gonna protect with that minimum section. Because the section's gonna vary so much. The permit permits a footprint 45 feet wide and 6 feet high. Okay, so that's three bags, maybe 4, it's 3 bags. 3 bags high from, I don't know where it's measured from. I think it's measured from the foundation. Sorry about that. It's supposed to be turned off. The other thing, that's part of the process we'll put you through. Okay, we'll work on that in the next few weeks. the next thing is, we have to have this done by March the 1st. That's the end of the window working on the beach. We got from November 1st to March the 1st. So come March the 1st, this will be done. Third thing is, in the last go-around, I don't know if it was with you, Alice, or probably maybe your predecessor, there was a number of homeowners along the beach that had expressed a willingness to put bags in front of their house
At their own expense, is that what you're
at their own expense. And I think it got ruled out of hand, but I think I think it's a mistake to not do that. How we can't commingle that with the contract, because, unless we, anyway, there's some things that have to be worked out if that's allowed, or if allowed at all, or, otherwise they could make a deal. If it was like a dredging project and you had a piece of, or a beach project, you wanted your beach nourished, but you weren't in the project, you'd make a deal with the dredger to put sand in front of your property. This is maybe the same thing. They make a deal with each one of them makes a deal with the contractor. He knows this in advance. The XYZ property owner is going to come to you and ask you to put more bags in front of their house, but that's not going to be commingled into the town's project.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Bill. I'd say that this thing has had enough trouble getting off the ground. Let's don't overcomplicate it.
Right.
And so I'd say, if folks want to do their own sandbags after this is done, they want to put some more on top, the town can decide whether it's going to allow that or not, or the Corps can, or whoever's going to be permitting it, the DCM folks. But if we start getting into talking to 26 homeowners, well, do you want to put an extra bag in? That's going to take forever, and we've got till March, and it's freaking November, and Thanksgiving and Christmas are coming out. We got to get this moving, and let's don't overcomplicate it, please.
Yeah. Yes. We'll leave it at that. If we want to put more bags in front of the house, maybe the town wanted to adopt some kind of a rule that says it has to conform to the design or something like that.
There you go.
But I think the town has a permit today that if folks were nervous about waiting for this project, if they wanted to get sandbags out in front of their houses, I believe, Alice, I'm not sure that it's still active, but I believe that they could come to the town and borrow from the town, and nothing is stopping someone from protecting their homes today. But I'm sure they are waiting to see the results of this and how far it's gonna get.
I would just like to clarify one issue, I guess, around the communication. In my mind, I believe it's the town's primary responsibility to be the prime communicator on this. Simply because the revetment belongs to the town, and the town has claimed that numerous times.
The
And
reason
so-
I don't agree with that, and I'm not an attorney, to personally tell you I'm not an attorney, but you all are representing all of those folks that sued the town, so I think it is the revetment, I think it's your responsibility to that initial communication saying this is what we were able to come up with for the $650,000. I do believe that once the project moves forward, the town owes updates to where we are on the progression of the project and the completion of the project, but I don't think it's in any of our best interest that we just start without everybody being communicated to, and then we're just gonna get phone calls, where's mine, where's mine, where's mine? I'd like it, just to be communicated.
Yeah,
And you all could disagree with me, I would say
I-
I'm not an attorney.
I agree we have an obligation to communicate to the plaintiffs or their now new owners, but I think that's where our obligation ends.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think
okay,
you just
all right.
communicate whatever the agreed upon solution is, cause you're all united in that settlement agreement, and then, Tom, you can just
No,
review the project to the status moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. I hear what you're saying. I think we're all really on the same page here. The issue about who's responsible for the revetment is as I read the contract, or the settlement, and I try to read the settlement before every one of these meetings, just to get it right back up here. is that once the work is completed as a result of the settlement, then the town, it's the town's obligation to maintain it. So
That's right.
that's kind of where I see you can take that same line with the communication, but y'all were able to communicate quite effectively back in 2015 through 2017, and I'm not throwing a rock there, okay, but just at face value. And it would seem to me it would also follow suit that either through whoever's on your committee as a citizen, from the plaintiff's side or your council, that you could put together an email list and get the word out to what's going on with this thing on a continual basis. And then once the project actually, like the mayor said, gets underway and we're stacking bags filled with sand, then we can put it on our webpage or have a tab for it or something. But until that time, in terms of especially when you're breaking bad news about what's going to go in front of Mr. and Mrs. Smith's house that they bought last year versus what they might have thought was going in front of their house, it's probably up to y'all.
Yeah, and let me say, I'm happy for us to send out, as I said before, and as Ms. Wyford said, happy to send out a communication to the folks we still have communication with, and I can assure the town that it's going to be supportive. It's going to, I mean, we want this to happen. We've done the litigation, we've got the settlement agreement. As long as what's being proposed is in line with the settlement agreement, we're going to say this is what it is. You know, it's not. We don't have $10 million. It's not going to be a $10 million project. We've got $650,000. It's going to be a $650,000 project.
Just to
So
clarify, though,
get
you-
expectations down where they need to be.
litigants or their successors. So you can easily find their mailing addresses. So say Micah had sold, whoever owns that house now, I think that person as a successor in the lawsuit, and Brian, please disagree, they should get the same letter.
They will.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm not quite as optimistic as Ms. Wyford is. I don't know how
We can-
I know.
I'll get that list
You can
together.
get that
It's not a
together?
big deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
okay,
I'll get that.
all right.
And the settlement agreement itself, and Jim and I spent, probably 40 hours or close to it negotiating this 6-page document
Yeah, we spent a bunch of time on it.
to try to work out these anticipated nuances. There's a provision in the settlement agreement that Do you want me to start over? For purposes of the minutes? Okay. Mr. Connor and I spent close to 40 hours negotiating this, trying to anticipate every nuance and contingency. And the whole purpose of the Revetment Committee is to be representative of the class, if you will. We can't have 26 people in here in the meeting, or the entire council, or excuse me, board, because that'd be a public meeting. And then, of course, when you add in the sale of the property, I mean, that's going to be a revolving door. So, one, the committee represents, from the plaintiff's perspective, their voice; from the town's perspective, the town's voice. There's a provision in the settlement agreement that speaks of the engineer providing updates to both the town, or to the committee, who then can take it back to your various, for the town to be the Board of Aldermen and staff, and for the plaintiffs, it would be those homeowners. So I think, we can put the settlement agreement, it's a public document, online if we need to. We can put the project manual online if we need to. But these subsequent purchasers weren't involved in any of this, and if you recall, part of the settlement agreement was to forgive an assessment related to the cost of that revetment. So, is it going to be, would it be easier if everyone that was a party to the lawsuit still owned the houses? Of course, but I think the first things first, we need to get the scope of the work, bid it out, see what it's gonna cost, and that way we'll know what we can tell whoever may ask.
I agree with that, and I'm just wanting to move to the next step. Can we go ahead and start talking about timeframes, like from Mr. Foreman, when he can get the bid documents out, how long it'll be before bids are due, and start talking timeframes, again, 1st of March is gonna come awfully fast. How soon do you think you could have the bid document?
We,
I'll give you, I'll put together a schedule when I get back to my office.
Great.
Microphone.
This could be-
Microphone.
I'm sorry. I'll put together a schedule when I get back to the office. This is competing with other things and I need to talk to those people.
Okay.
Let's make sure.
from my perspective, I can get the release drafted within 24 hours of you getting me the information, and I'll get it immediately to Mr. Connor. Unless there's gonna be a modification to the project manual, I can have that reviewed by the end of this week easily.
Okay.
And I'm gonna interject again, I don't really believe that the Revetment Committee saw your design, Bill. It was what you sent to the town manager and myself. I didn't pass it on to the group, so I still think we have that issue of the design before the bids can go out, because the contractor has to know what they're gonna do. So we need to come back fairly soon. If you can't explain today what the design is, we need to come back fairly soon to this group with the design so that we can agree what you're gonna do in terms of putting in the bid for contractors.
Well, can I just make a little codicil of that? And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, our objective was, once we agree, or once the Revetment Committee agrees to recommend an engineer, and the Board of Aldermen accepts that recommendation and contracts with the engineer, both sides of the committee are kind of hands-off. It's the engineer as the professional who says, for this amount of money, this is the most protection, in my professional opinion, we can provide. Is that?
I'd agree with that, again, with a couple of provisos. I mean, just looking at the language of the agreement, certainly we're relying on the engineer and his expertise, that's for sure. And we're gonna contract with him using the standard forms. It says when the town and plaintiffs meet with the engineers to discuss the work, the engineer selected will be instructed that he is to report to the town and the Revetment Committee or its successor. The previously formed Revetment Committee, including the town representatives, may continue to oversee the work, or the plaintiffs in the town may form a new committee to consult with the engineer and contractor during construction. So there's consultation, but yeah, certainly the design is the engineer's responsibility.
Because I specifically recall you and I talking about the mayhem that would likely ensue if we had elected officials and individual litigants who aren't specialized in design or coastal engineering wanting to give their various 2 cents in. So we've said, whichever engineer's chosen, that's their bailiwick, and we have input, but that's their prerogative, and then they report back to us as things progress.
We would prefer to have one person with the town that we communicate with. It's been Mike in the past. I think now Alice, you may have gotten the dubious distinction of having that new job. And then everything goes through her to the committee. That would, for us, you know.
We don't want, Bill, we don't want you having to try to get 12 different people on the phone to get permission to do something. But what the settlement agreement says is that the engineer shall report and consult with the committee.
We'll provide you with documents that you can share that illustrate what's going on.
So in other words, if you want Mr. Benson and Alice, I'm sorry, I didn't get your last name. Ms. Daring to be your point of contact, that's okay, but that person has to be responsible for getting it out to the whole committee, because the whole committee is supposed to be involved with interfacing with the engineer. And yeah, I get it, you don't want to try to talk to 12 people, but the way it's set up, it's the committee that is supposed to know what's going on with the engineer and to consult with the engineer. Does everybody agree to that? Yeah. Okay. And Ms. Daring, do you mind taking on the obligation of making sure you distribute whatever comes from Mr. Foreman out to the whole committee?
Well, I think the agreement says that he's responsible for communicating to both, so I think I can reach out to the parties on our end, but I think he should be reaching out to both. That's not.
Yeah,
Should I share it with
yes.
Sid or with you or Don?
Sid, which do you prefer? You want it to come to you and,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Have it come to me, and I'll distribute it.
so your points of contact will be Ms. Daring and Ms. Wyford. Is that what everybody agree, everybody wants? Okay.
And by point of contact, let's clarify, this is not it's by way of an update,
Right, right,
not a debate.
right.
Yeah, we're not deputizing Ms. Daring or Ms. Wyford as sub-engineers.
Well, Ms.
Yeah.
Daring has a very, very full plate, and,
Yeah.
she inherited this.
So does Miss Wyford. So,
Well, I'm just saying, the objective there is you send out a memo, same memo to both parties, to one person. That way you don't have to deal with 15, 20 people on either side, and then Ms. Daring can send an email to the Board of Aldermen saying this is where we're at.
My fear is that I send it to Alice and Sid, and my reward is 25 emails coming to me, but I can't deal with that.
That won't happen from the town side.
Yeah.
not gonna happen from our side either.
Phone calls and emails.
Well, we're fundamentally going back to why the committee was set up, okay? We're going back to why the settlement agreement stipulated that a committee comprised of town representatives and plaintiff representatives were to set up. We're the conduit to each side. So you're the conduit now. If you're the lead person, it used to be Fred, and I guess it's you now, Sid, it'd be up to you to disseminate the information as it is going to be the town side. And because ultimately, when it's all said and done, before anything actually moves forward, it's going to have to be approved by the Board of Aldermen. And it's going to be up to the committee, as I understand it, the entire committee, to bring it to the Board of Aldermen through the manager on the agenda to make a decision to move forward to spend the money. Am I correct, Brian?
Well, we've already entered into the contract. The only question that I have is, and I wanted to clarify this with Mr. Foreman. So the design that you previously sent is not, you're contemplating revising that design?
Yeah, I am
Okay.
going to revise it.
Okay. So, Mr. Leonard, to answer your question, we've already entered into the contract with Mr. Foreman. As we talked about earlier, the design is in his lap, so to speak. We're not designing it. The plaintiffs aren't designing it. So as I see it, the next steps are, one, we get the release information squared away. Two, I'll review the project manual. And then three, you send in the design saying, based on the contours of the settlement agreement, this is the design I believe is best fits our budget to reach the objective stated in the settlement agreement.
Okay.
And then you let it out, you tell us who you awarded the contract to, give us progress reports, and that's it. I mean, at that point, there's no, well, Mr. Leonard, I don't know if that answered your question, but there will be nothing brought forward additionally for the town Board of Aldermen to approve at this point, other than pay apps.
Right. No, but eventually before, my understanding, I'll have to reread it again, but my understanding is before we actually spend the money, that it's going to take board action because of the cost of spending the money. Am I correct?
Right. The board action was to enter into the contract. Now,
Right.
we may have to have some budget amendments, but I think we've earmarked that money for a decade or close to it.
Can I ask one more question? I've asked this before, and I'm gonna throw it out one more time. Is there any way we can do this as a sole source?
What does that mean?
We don't bid it. We're bound by the municipal procurement rules in North Carolina because if it's over a certain amount, I think it's $500,000 that we have to put it up and have to go through a competitive bidding process. If the project owner was the committee, I don't know how you structure that, but, then I could sole source it. I could pick the contractor that gives me the that gives me the most help and that we think can give us the best project and not, plus you have bonding requirements, that's gonna eat up, 1-2% of the contract price. Just things are gonna eat into the amount of money you have because we have to go through the procurement process.
In my opinion, legal opinion, we'd have to modify the settlement agreement. There was some discussions probably a year or two ago that the town would essentially interplead or just pay over to the plaintiffs the $200,000 and modify the settlement agreement reflecting that the town has satisfied its obligations, so it could be a sole source as a private project. That never came to fruition.
Right.
So as it sits right now, these are public funds and we have to follow the bidding laws.
Okay. That's the same answer I've been getting for 2 years.
If you guys can get together and get all of the plaintiffs to say, sure, that's fine, town writes you a check for $200,000 less than 26 we've already paid, and we're out of it, I think I can speak for most of the Board of Aldermen and the mayor, we'd be happy with that result. But, that's gonna be like herding cats, I would think.
That's a,
Yeah,
we
okay.
can't do that.
So,
I see the advantages, I see that it would have the advantages regarding the public bidding laws, but I just don't know how that would possibly work. We're not an organization that has a president or anything like that. We're just some clients, and half of those people are gone, so I think it has to stay with the town.
and of the new purchasers, some of them may not care to be actively involved.
That's it, yeah, that kind of thing.
Mr. Foreman, I understand the principle. I think it would be a cost-saving measure, but unfortunately, this is a contractual
I understand.
obligation on both parties, and there's a way we can amend this, so we'd have to follow the way stated in the settlement agreement to amend it, and I don't think that's logistically achievable. So,
So back to timeframes, it sounds like the point that Alderman Leonard was making was this does have to come back before the board. We meet the first Wednesday of every month, so
I think
as soon as you can get the drawings and, you know what I'm saying, so we're waiting.
It doesn't come.
I thought that's what you just said.
No further board, that was his question, no further board action is required at this
We don't
point
it doesn't have to come to us, okay.
until there's a pay app submitted. And technically,
I just didn't want our board meetings to be the holdup if you can get the design out and get it moving.
and technically, and this is technically, I don't even know that pay apps would have to come back to the board if they're within budget, because by the board entering into this contract, then the board's already agreed to the contract provisions, one of which is paying. So,
All right, so getting back again is to schedule, so I think the ball's in your court, Mr. Foreman, to get us a schedule.
Right.
Based on your review of your work and so forth. And then, do you see any problem with getting this done by March 1st? Is that doable?
I don't think that's a problem at all.
Good, good.
I won't.
So is the town issuing the RFP or IFB, or is it the engineer?
We would treat it just like any other contract. The project engineer would administer the bidding process.
Okay.
And is our permit still valid?
Yes, I believe it is. I may get overruled on that, but if I do, I'll let you know. I'm working on that right now to make sure we don't, to figure out what the constraints are.
Cause it looked like it was issued back in, I wanna say 2017 or something like that, and I don't know if it was extended out or if it's expired.
The variance extended it indefinitely, I believe.
And I don't know if you've been, I saw your email, the original variance, I forwarded it to the town and I can forward it to you. There was a second and third variance and a permit extension. And I think to the extent we can round up those things in-house, it'd be better to interface with than as opposed to interfacing with CAMA, unless you already have.
I do not, I have the permit, but I don't have the all that variance information.
I can get that to you.
I asked Clark to give it to me, but I'm not sure he was, no, he wasn't involved in that, was he?
He did, the reefs at one point.
Right.
Well, the CAPA process is not slow, I mean, it is slow, that's why I'm bringing that up. So, I know that Tina is very backlogged.
This is a repair project, so it'd be treated as a general permit.
But it's still taking them a long time to process them.
Brian, you'll get whatever we've already got over to Bill.
Yeah, and I'll do that right now as we speak, because I emailed it last night to my folks.
I think what the mayor is saying, that we need to get the permit, started now, that ironed out now, early on, even before going out for bid. If we wanna meet the time frame because of the backlog that currently exists with them right
And
now.
the first thing I'm gonna
They're
do is,
short-staffed.
after I send Mr. Eads the information, is keep figure out what the permitting situation is. And, I'll communicate that to you all.
Okay.
I asked the Division of Coastal Management to put everything in writing. So,
Nice question. Isn't the Army Corps, potentially running a permanent pipe and doing sand revet on that exact same part of the beach we're talking about at the same time? And is that gonna be a conflict?
I don't think it's a permanent pipe, they'll be running pipes out there, but we've always said that we were not gonna interfere with the Army Corps of Engineers' work, with the work that will be done on these sandbags. So that March 1st date, if that's the case, you're gonna have the Army Corps Engineer out there with a bunch of pipe, come what, second week of December?
There's actually a meeting that's
Yeah.
about to start in 5 minutes down on the north end that we have scheduled with the Army Corps to find out their timeline for the project that, he just brought up. So that will be occurring this, environmental window period as well. And we're also set to resume the FEMA project once the Army Corps project is finished. So there's a lot going on,
okay.
coming down the road.
That's why
in
Mike
that
left.
same area.
Mike departed this meeting to go down to meet with the Corps.
So the good news is there's sand coming.
Yes.
The complicated news is everybody's gonna have to be able to coordinate with each other.
I mean, there could be economy of scale there, though, like for the backfill, things of that nature.
Just tap the pipe and run it right into the bags.
There you go.
I think some of the other developers might be a little.
I think the federal
Make a lot
government,
of people unhappy
I
when
thi-
you do that who weren't right there.
I think the federal government will give you a free pair of stainless steel handcuffs if you do that.
Only guy locked up for violating a Army Corps of Engineers job.
I got a quick question. How much were the sandbags that the reef just put in?
I couldn't keep a number, I think it's around 600,000, but I don't hold me to that.
I understand. Thank you for your answer.
We can ask that, Cameron, I know Alice talks with one of the,
Well, I'm just trying to get a ballpark idea. What they put in was, all right. That number, I mean.
I talked to the foreman out there, and he said about 500 a bag, and that's a ballpark.
I think a lot of the cost goes into getting folks on site and set up.
Well, that leads into another one.
your committee? Is it all on this committee from Hodgson?
We had asked about that, I don't believe he's on the IT committee.
I asked the same question. So I don't, your question, I was told he's not on this committee.
Good contact for the reef.
Right.
We have had several meetings with Bo throughout the past year, just on sandbags in general. So we have been in contact with him. Mike and I have had different just conversations with him, so he's aware of what we're doing.
What I'm saying is he can give you the dollar
Yeah.
amount.
Sure.
Yeah.
He's on the board, on
Yeah.
the HOA board.
We have not talked to him in probably in the past couple months, but he's definitely a resource we can reach back out to. That's no problem.
Sounds like we have a plan.
Is that everything, manager?
Yes.
Okay. So, we're done?
I'm satisfied.
Yep.
We're ready to get these next steps rolling and looking to Mr. Foreman to
Okay,
take those steps.
Let me just recap on that. Okay, so Mr. Foreman's going to provide me with Ms. Harper's information and Mr. Bill Smallwood's information, including his company. I'll draft a release, forward that to Mr. Connor. Once we have that worked out, we'll send that out for execution. I'm going to review the project manual you sent last October, and you're going to work on a revised design to send over? Okay. I just emailed you the original variance and 2 other CAMA documents, the permit extension and a second variance. That's what I have on the to-do list for now.
Brian, just real quick, when did that permit, when did it say the expiration on it was?
Well, there was an extension,
When I glanced at them, my concern is that they may be expired, and that puts a whole different wrinkle in your timeframes. So I'm hoping I'm wrong,
More than that.
more than a whole glitch.
well, the original permit expired, was set to expire on December 31st, 2018, but we,
Extended it.
I know that the last time I was in front of the CRC is when we discussed allowing the geotubes to stay out there
Right.
until they breached. But I can't remember what impact, if any, that had on the permit.
So I think, again, if we could make that a top priority to try and figure out if our permit is live or expired, I think
That's a very good point.
that needs to be on somebody's to-do list.
It's on my list.
And- Thank you, Ms. Mayor, that's a great point. And I just wanted to clarify too, with regard to the release being sent to Yogi's widow, that we're doing that, because it'll be nice if she'll sign it, but that's not gonna stop the project if she doesn't sign it, because
Well, I
she,
mean, I do have some concerns that if we need to either figure out if he has a patent or not, because I know that's what came up, because from our fiduciary responsibilities to all the taxpayers, we cannot willingly go into a project knowing that there may be some type of lawsuit that comes out of it. That's the whole reason we're here. So she needs to sign off on something, or we need to prove that there is no patent.
well, I don't think the burden's on us, though, respectfully. I think the burden's on her. If she says that she's got a patent, or Woody had a patent, Yogi
Well, that's
Yogi
what
had
I'm
a
saying. If she
patent,
releases it,
give
then
us the,
that's fine.
give
I'm
us
good
the,
with that.
well, right, if she does that, but if she doesn't release, and she says, no, I'm gonna keep my options open, rather than us saying we have to prove a negative, if you will, it's very hard to do that. Tell us, if you think he's got a patent, tell us what it is, and we'll respect it, you know? But he doesn't have a patent, I guarantee you, I'd bet you $1,000 right now he doesn't have a patent on that, because he would have told us if he did.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
as long as
Yeah.
Brian is satisfied that we've done our due diligence in ensuring that that cannot come back to the town of North Topsail Beach, I'm satisfied.
And all I'm saying is, let's don't be scared of an idle threat.
I'm not
Yeah.
scared of an unfair, I
Yeah.
just wanna make sure,
Well-
again, just do our due diligence, and I think that's
Sure.
been hanging out there for a long time, and if she
So-
had one, I do also agree that she probably would have provided it.
Well, the other thing too is that we have delayed the process here by probably a good, going on 2 years now, over this whole issue with Mr. Harper and Mr. Harper's estate. And I get it, and I understand your concern, Mayor. At the same time, we've gotta get going.
I'm
We
not
gotta
saying to
get going.
stop.
I
I'm
know.
not saying to stop, I'm
I
just
know.
saying to close, just somehow, just get that closed.
Shut the door, understand?
Shut the door.
Secure the hatch.
So I don't want to keep talking about that. You know what I mean? Like, we continue to talk about that. Let's just get that issue
Let's get it over.
closed and just move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing further, Mr. Leonard.
All right. Gonna adjourn the meeting and try to
get to the next one?
All right.